Thank you all for being here. Today, we'll be diving into how to automate your estate planning firm in 2025 from client intake to document generation. My name is Brittany Hernandez, and I'm a lawyer and the head of legal innovation at Gavel. Gavel is the automation infrastructure for the modern scalable law practice, empowering lawyers with the tools to cut drafting time by 90% or more and create additional streams of revenue with document automation. I'm joined today by Wouter and Beth. Wouter is the founder and CEO of DecisionVault, which he built after seeing his wife, Julia, who's an estate planning attorney, experience pain points in the client intake and design planning phases of her practice that he saw could be addressed through tech. Beth Kostelnik is an estate planning lawyer turned founder of Techie PM, an IC consulting firm focused on cloud-based technologies such as CRMs, practice management tools, and document automation. Her firm excels at leveraging data and system integrations to improve both scalability and operational efficiency for her clients. We decided to break this session up into 3 parts. Wouter will cover how to streamline your client intake and design planning process with DecisionVault. I will then cover how you can repurpose that data to generate automated legal documents with Gavel. Beth will then go over real-world examples of how lawyers are using these tools together in practice. We will save a few minutes at the end for your questions, so feel free to post your questions in the chat as you think of them, and we'll pick them up once we get to that section. After questions, I'll just do a quick wrap up. So without further ado, I'll pass the time over to Wouter.
All right, thanks, Brittany. So real quick introduction from my side. So I think the biggest thing here is why would we insert DecisionVault into this flow with Gavel? And while it's true that Gavel kind of has these workflows or intake questionnaires that you can use to gather information from your clients, it's very worthwhile to insert DecisionVault in that flow to get the data in to DecisionVault first and then to Gavel, because Brittany, then we have the option of doing more with that info that's gathered, right? So for instance, what DecisionVault can do is it has functionality for adding a design sheet into the mix. So you can think of that as sort of your meeting template, or your clients are filling in the questionnaire. And then the design sheet is like an attorney or firm staff only section to the questionnaire, where you can use as much as legal shorthand as you would like. And you can put all your questions there that you would run through in a client meeting to determine how we're going to design this person's plan. What different choices do we have? Who's going to be serving in which role? You can gather information there, and actually those questions and answers then can get linked up into, and I'm sure that Beth is going to show some of that, into your sync of the document automation into Gavel. But there's more. So for instance, DecisionVault does a thorough financial intake, right? So the assets can get filled in. Yeah, you can put them all up. So the financial intake is something that you would have a hard time doing that in Gavel. And then also, once we get that financial inventory, you push a button, you get a nice looking Excel sheet out. So financial intake is very helpful. Diagrams, Gavel will generate PDFs, will generate your Word documents, but DecisionVault can merge some of that information from the questionnaire or from the design sheet into your own PowerPoint templates to kind of speed up these diagrams that you might use to explain to a client how their plan's supposed to work. We sync information back to a whole bunch of different case management tools. And then also you might generate some documents in Gavel. You might still generate some documents in Interactive Legal and Wealth Counsel or Logic. So that's also where we have different links. So adding in DecisionVault as the place where you can work over time and have your clients kind of log back in and add more info later, then gives you all these options of moving the data around and using it in different ways.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Wouter. So with that, as you mentioned, you're able to really repurpose and reuse this information in lots of different ways because DecisionVault has done such a good job of understanding that people use lots of different tools and we need the information to move from one tool into another tool seamlessly. They've done a really good job of creating these different integrations. And one of the integrations that they focused on and prioritized is with Gavel. So what Gavel is it is a document automation solution for attorneys that allows you to take your legal templates and turn them into automated workflows or questionnaires where you get to control what the questions are and what the conditions, the calculations, the logic of what documents are actually generated at the end, how many, under what circumstances, and then within the documents themselves, having a lot of control and power over deciding which actual pages within the documents show, lots of if this, then that logic when it comes to if the person is married, then I want you to have this additional page included in the document. Or if they're in a particular jurisdiction, show this clause rather than this other clause. If there are multiple agents, add an S at the end of agents. You can get really granular and have a lot of control over how these documents are prepared and generated. And you're able to, as Wouter mentioned, reuse the information that's collected within DecisionVault in your Gavel workflows and questionnaires. So I'm going to show you a quick example of this using the Uniform Statutory Power of Attorney for California. So the way that we have this set up in the actual DecisionVault is you would go through and you would have your clients would go through this questionnaire that you set up, what the questions are. There are some that are already default in there for you. So they would go into here, they would put in their POA decisions, they would decide whether they want to designate a single agent or more than one, how the agents are to act jointly or separately if there's more than one, whether they want to grant the agent's power over all of the relevant areas or want to limit those powers, etc. So the client would go through, make these different decisions that would get stored within DecisionVault. When you want to go ahead and generate or populate a power of attorney, all you would need to do is go into DecisionVault, click on your matter. In this case, we're going to use this example here where our client is Taylor, and they have a couple of different people, a son, a daughter, a stepdaughter, and a wealth manager that we can use as roles in our workflows. When we want to generate this power of attorney, we just go to integrations here, choose Gavel. If you had multiple integrations set up, you would see all of them from the list. You're going to pull which document you want to prepare. In this case, I'm preparing this Uniform Statutory Form Power of Attorney. And then I just say pull fields. That way I'm able to see how this is mapped over from the different questionnaires that we have set up within DecisionVault. So for example, in my case, I have customized one of the forms that people can fill out to add additional questions so that I can map them over to the questionnaire that I've created within Gavel. So you have your main standard questions such as prefix, first name, etc. And then you can get all the way down to mapping over questions that relate to the multiple agents information. And this is something that's a really big differentiating factor in the relationship between how DecisionVault works with Gavel, because one of the most robust features that Gavel offers is the ability to have repeating items. And what repeating items are is anything where you don't know from the beginning whether there are 0 or whether there are 10 or more. And you need to be able to have the flexibility to enter information about multiple different people, such as children, any beneficiaries or heirs or creditors, even assets, if you're not talking about just people, but also numbers or expenses or whatever the case may be, where you don't know in the beginning if there are 0 or more than 1. So we only have to map over how this particular flow one time, and then it's going to remember this mapping throughout your different matters, and also whenever you run this in the future. So all we really need to do is make sure that we are mapping it to the correct question. So in this case, I have these POA decision questions that I have mapped over. And then we just say process template here at the bottom. And then we can just see what those results are here. So the results are going to show us in now our Gavel workflow all of the different things that have mapped over. So for example, the client's information is information we don't have to retype. We're repurposing this information that was collected in DecisionVault, repurposing that here within Gavel. We have their address, their city, state, county, all of the questions that were answered in their initial planning form. We're able to see that all of those selections are made here. And then we would just have to add any additional or answer any additional questions that weren't asked in that form. So for example, they said that they wanted to limit the powers, but we need to designate which powers they want to grant for these particular agents. So we would add any additional tick marks to where we want to take certain things off or add certain things on. And then we'd go ahead and continue. And from here, this is going to generate our document for us so that we can send this over to our the responsible attorney to set up a signing meeting with the client or whatever else. And in this case, I've also had this automatically emailed over to the responsible attorney. So here we can see that we're able to have all of that information perfectly formatted inside of this document, including all of those different people that were designated as these multiple agents in this case, their first, middle, and last name, as well as their address on the line that it's supposed to be. And then we only have the initials next to the different agent powers that we have specifically selected. Now, as I mentioned, I have had this automatically emailed over to our, sorry, one second, here it is here. I've had this automatically emailed over to where I need this to go to notify whoever's in charge of this particular case that we need to, that the power attorney is attached here for this particular client, and we need to go ahead and review that and set up the meeting for them to get this notarized. Now, what I used to do when I first started as an attorney is I would have my my uniform statutory power of attorney template or something like this. I would go ahead and duplicate that. I'd have all my different random instructions in here that I would have to kind of go through and take out. I would look through and try to find all my square brackets and type manually in Taylor's name and his address and all of the different people here. And I have to make sure that I, don't have any errors as I go through and change out the relevant parts. But this can be such a waste of time. As you've seen, we've been able to, in such a short period of time, go through and just make certain selections, push information that we have from DecisionVault over into Gavel, and just generate this document without having to go through every single time and manually type in all of this different information. So the other thing that you will notice when you start using Gavel is that once you run a workflow one time, that information is stored in what's called a data manager. So this is where you're able to actually see past sessions that have been run. And what's really special about the data manager, so this is what Gavel looks like when you log in. And there's an option here on the left-hand side to see past sessions, as I mentioned. So we're going to look for the session that I just ran, which is this one here for the power of attorney. And I can see all of the times that this has been run in the past and what the answers were given by myself and obviously from the client's selections from within DecisionVault. And if there's information that is the same, such as person's name or their email or the people that they wanted to elect for certain roles, then you can, similarly to how we've pushed information from DecisionVault into Gavel, push information from within Gavel to generate other documents. And it doesn't only have to be one document at a time. You can generate multiple documents at once. In this example, I'm just going to push this last session, the one where we want to reuse the information about this particular client, into another workflow. In this case, we're going to look at this eligibility for a particular type of grant. So that information is already pushing over through. I don't have to retype anything. It eliminates that chance of human error of retyping something with incorrect spelling, for example. And I would just answer the questions in whatever additional questions, as I mentioned, were not included in one of the planning forms from DecisionVault. So here I can generate this letter now, which has also now been emailed automatically where it needs to go and perfectly formatted with generating today's date automatically, putting the different information for that client in the right positions. And then there's a lot of logic actually happening on the back end of this particular document where it's saying that this person, our client, is eligible for a particular type of grant in this case. But if they had answered differently, or we had made different selections in the workflow, this would have a different result. Such as, for example, if I had said that this person doesn't own or will not own the home, not really mattering what this particular document is saying, but more for the logic flow to show you what that looks like and what's possible here. Instead of what we saw before, we now see that this person may not be eligible and they need to be using the grant money for this particular reason in order to qualify. So you can kind of see how we can go through and create these different workflows. So I want to show you how to do that now. So I've shown you how you can take information from the different decisions that your client makes within their design process and in their client intake forms within DecisionVault, how to repurpose and take that information and put that into a Gavel workflow, how to generate your documents from that, how to make different option selections from within your workflow to generate certain conditions and elements. But now I want to show you how you would actually create one of these Gavel workflows and then how to map that over to DecisionVault. So one way that you can create a workflow is by using our generative AI feature called Blueprint. Now, what this allows you to do is all you would need to do is take one of your documents or multiple documents. You'd say, go into Gavel, you can say new workflow. From here, you would have the option to start with questions, start with documents, or pre-built workflow, where a pre-built workflow is several different forms that we have already automated for you in different jurisdictions and different practice areas, such as an estate planning package with a trust for a couple, so that you're not having to go through this process of automating these documents that many people use across different jurisdictions and practice areas. You can just go through and try that workflow right away and go ahead and start putting in your information and generating those documents. So that's one option. The other option would be to start with questions, meaning maybe you want to just start with the different questions that you want to create. And sometimes you don't have a document that you're automating, you're just collecting information, or there is some high value just in the logic itself that you would present to your clients. Or you can start with documents. So if you start with documents here, that's going to get us into this generative AI feature that I mentioned. You're going to say upload and choose your document. So in this case, I would say an anti-coercion insurance disclosure for a mortgage in this example. Then when you say next, you'll give it a name, and then it will take you over to this screen that I showed before. Now, what's happening, what the system is doing is it's analyzing the document to see if there are any places that might repeat and might change from person to person or matter to matter, where it would be a good idea to ask a question around that piece in order to make it to where we can automate the process of preparing this document or multiple documents in the future. So in this case, it's recognizing that there's space in this template for a lender name, a license number, a loan number, a borrower name, etc. But for the borrower name, it's also recognizing that borrower name shows up 2 times. So if you look on the right-hand side here on where these questions are, it says 1 of 2 instances. So if I scroll down, I see that it's recognizing that these are the same. So in a document that could be 80 pages long and you have to put the decedent's name 100 different times, it's going to consolidate that into a single question. And we can change what that question says by just saying edit question details here. So I could change what this question says. A variable name is a unique identifier and way to link the answer to the question and this question so that we can refer to it in other places in the document or in the workflow. And then when I'm ready, I can just say draft workflow. And a workflow is just that set of questions and answers that we can add different conditions to in order to generate these types of documents. So it just takes a few seconds. It's going to take us over to what is called the Gavel editor. And here in the Gavel editor, we're able to add additional questions, add any logic that we want. We can change the wording. We can change the titles of these different pages, whatever else we want to do here. And what's really nice about this is that you don't have to have any prior coding experience to interact with this. This is a very block by block sort of building. So if I want to add a question, all I do is say add a question. I can choose what type of question I want to add here. For example, if I want to ask for additional information about who's the responsible attorney, for example, and there are specific attorneys who always work on these matters in our particular law firm, for example, I can use a drop-down menu. I could say, who is the responsible attorney? I can give that the variable name of responsible attorney. And then I can add some choices. For example, I could say Brittany L. Hernandez. I could say Beth Kostelnik here. Help me out. And then whatever else I want. And then I can add different logic to any of these different pages and questions, all by just saying logic here. I want to show this question if the answer to a previous question is some value. And same thing for pages. If I want to only show, let's say, for example, if there's a whole question section on spouse's information, then I could say only show this page if the person has said that they are married. So I can do that by saying edit page logic, show this page if the answer to some question is a certain value. In that example, if the person has answered that they are married. Now, what's also happened on the back end here is that the document that we dropped into the system and had it analyzed has automatically been attached to this workflow. And additionally, it has already had all of the different variables or the different answers to the questions and how we refer to that, which in this case is called a variable. They've already been dropped into this document so that we don't have to go through and do any coding, like I mentioned. So you just go through and say, I want this to go here. If I want to add any additional information, such as now I have the responsible attorney's information included, I can use something called the document tagger, which is just a free word add-in that you can get from the add-in store. So I'm going to click on my document tagger. I'm going to go ahead and log in. And if I want to make any changes, add any logic, add any additional variables, just like we saw here, for example, I could go into here, search for the one that I've been working on today, this one here for this insurance disclosure. And anywhere that I want that information to go, let's say that I need there's an additional section now that you have to say something like responsible attorney. I can make that change, add by going to simple variables. If I expand this a little bit, I just go to simple variables. I find the responsible attorney, and I think I didn't save it. So I'm going to just quickly make sure I save and refresh that really quick. So if I need to make any changes, I just save and refresh. Now I'll be able to see that responsible attorney variable that I created. And then I can just put my cursor where I need that information to go. Let's say that I need it to go right under here. Then I just say how I want that to appear, either standard, uppercase, or first letter capital. And then I say insert. And when I'm ready to replace that document, on the bottom right here, I just say select the document to replace and update that in Gavel. Now all of those changes will be reflected. I'm able to go through and see those changes when I go ahead and run that workflow. All the questions are ready for me. I can select the attorney, add in the different information, and when I run through this, it will generate those documents with those selections in there. Now, I need to pass my time now over to Beth. I just wanted to quickly show you that it's really easy to connect these two pieces together. You just go to integrations in DecisionVault, sign into your account, and then whatever additional customizations for questions that you need in order to map these two, you would just do that in your questionnaires in DecisionVault. So I'm going to pass the time back over now to Beth so she can go through all of the real world applications for this type of setup.
Hi, everybody. Great job, Brittany. Thanks for covering all the technical aspects. I think what you showed that I'm not going to get into is how intuitive it is to set up the kind of the back end of Gavel. So, it's doesn't require the coding, and it's pretty easy to navigate once you get the hang of it. And that was awesome. So it was a really good overview. And what I'm going to go over today with the group is I'm going to kind of take it back to a high level view of you as the law firm owner or somebody who is, managing over your estate planning practice. What does this workflow, like in a very tangible way, how does it work for you? Like what happens when somebody calls? Like taking it back to that step for a second. So let's first kind of get aligned on the different stages of this process. And as I'm going through this, I'm going to speak to where these two systems come into play and really shine. And I don't know, am I able to see the chat, Brittany? I don't know if I am, but if I'm curious to know if anybody's using Gavel or DecisionVault or using them together, or if they're considering it, but I might not be able to see the chat. But um, let's first start with the lead contact, the firm. So they're going to call you and they're going to tell you, what's going on. There might be a period of time that they go through the intake process. Now, that's usually where you're going to be using a CRM or a practice management tool. Thank you for those of you chiming in. You're going to be using a CRM or practice management tool to make sure that somebody is a warm lead, that you don't lose track of them until you know whether or not they should move forward as being a client. And during that stage, that is kind of the first point where we're going to start thinking about DecisionVault. Because once it's qualified, you do want them to move forward with that design meeting or that attorney consultation. They really want to maybe gather some detailed information before they sit down with somebody. That is where we're going to want to make sure when that appointment gets scheduled, they also receive their first link to get into DecisionVault. So they're going to receive the link and create their account. Now, that could be manually, which a lot of times people are doing this manually, putting it in an Outlook calendar or a Google calendar, but that can also be something that is automated through a CRM or through a scheduler to be able to not only confirm the meeting and send those confirmations and reminders, but also incorporate pointing your clients to how you want them to act. How do you want them to act? You want them to give you some information ahead of time, because the more information, the quicker you're going to be able to deliver and turn people through your process. So that initial email can maybe come from a different system that you're scheduling and sending that reminder. But then there's also those reminders that what if they haven't submitted it and you really wanted them to submit 72 hours before the appointment where you're going to be doing the design and it hasn't come through yet. That can either be done again through a CRM, ideally one that's integrating with DecisionVault. So DecisionVault can tell the system whether or not it's been filled out and submitted yet. Or DecisionVault also has the option to create reminders. So you can put the date of the meeting in there, and if it's 4 days out, you can send them a reminder saying, hey, just checking in. We noticed you haven't filled it out yet. Do you have any questions? So-and-so's here to help. So giving them that human touch and prompting them to do the behaviors that are going to make this successful for both of you and make the most of your time together, while also minimizing the tedious administrative tasks and only having kind of a human get involved if the person really does need assistance. They can get that email and say, oh, those are the instructions to get help. I actually am having an issue. I'm not super comfortable with technology. And maybe you get somebody on the phone to do a more detailed intake and help them fill out their DecisionVault if that's needed. I will say though, and that's okay to move forward, Brittany, it's fine. I will say though, I had never come across anybody in my firm that wasn't able to use the DecisionVault questionnaire. And I remember having somebody who was in his 80s at the time, and he wasn't super comfortable with technology. He would telling me that, yeah, things move so fast, and telling me about like the history of how technology has advanced through his lifetime. And he's like, but I'm going to give it a shot. And sure enough, no problems. He filled out the entire thing. And I think that is hugely attributed to kind of the minimalist style of how DecisionVault user experience is. And I'm sure if you are on the Facebook groups, you see people raving about DecisionVault and how it's just so seamless to get up and running, and the clients like it too. So I just wanted to put that out there as well. I don't find that many people actually do need assistance. So once they create their account, then they're going to fill out their questionnaire. specifically the questionnaire. And I'm saying that because I'm going to talk to you about a different feature in DecisionVault in a minute. So the questionnaire is where the client is adding all of their information, ideally before the appointment. And this one, and then the reminders. Oh, sorry, this is where I mentioned the reminders and the facilitating the attorney meeting. The questionnaire, this is all happening prior to the meeting, but then in the meeting as well, the attorney may have the screen open with them where they can add additional things or get started on adding contacts. Like, for example, let's say they decide during the meeting they want their best friend as a residuary beneficiary. They didn't think to put their best friend in the questionnaire to begin with. It's very easy to be in the matter and just do a quick ad of their best friend. And you don't have to spend all the time saying, okay, and what's their address and how do you spell their name? Get into the details of it. You can do kind of a quick ad and say, and then after this meeting, you can just jump back into your questionnaire and finish, confirming your daughter's, married name spelling, or adding your best friend, or updating some additional information that you discussed during your design meeting. They have access to keep going back and forth into that. And I find that that's a really great way of just making sure there's one source of truth of data. And they're also being able to take away some of that time that you would have in your design meeting going over the tedious kind of contact detail information. So as the attorney's facilitating the design meeting, we're ready to move on to the next slide. That's where the DecisionVault design sheet really shines. So what that's going to allow you to do, you get all of that data from the questionnaire, and then you get all of this data in this design sheet that is something that the attorney can fill out with all of the design details of the estate plan that they're going to generate, and then use all that beautiful data that the client entered, that the firm entered, and push that over into different systems beautifully to the Gavel workflow and the custom documents, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. But then you also have some stuff that's built into DecisionVault that works really, really well. For example, and Wouter mentioned it in the beginning, but I want to emphasize how cool it is the financial spreadsheet. So it basically takes in everything in a very good user experience, that very minimalist style. They're kind of toggling on, yeah, we own that thing, we own this thing. It guides them through adding some, details about the values and that type of thing. All of that information with a click can be published into an Excel spreadsheet. And the Excel spreadsheet looks polished and professional and done. Like, the amount of time that would take for somebody to manually be tasked and the opportunity for there to be flubbing up some numbers would be huge, but that's all automated. So whatever the client is putting in as their value, that's coming through, and then you have a very good understanding of the overall estate value. One of the use cases of what I use that financial sheet for with my firm was we use that for the trust funding. I would pull that out and I would add a column with specific details of the trust funding to help guide the conversation. And clients loved it. I would print one for them. I would have one for me. We would talk about trust funding and they'd be like marking it up and following along. And then it kind of becomes their to-do list. So there's some things inside DecisionVault that can be pulled out to be really helpful. That's one of the examples. You can push things over to something to Gavel and to customize all those documents. And you can also push it over to something like your practice management tools or your CRMs to update the data there, because you might have more up-to-date data from the client and now you can get it in the right spots. So now let's talk a little bit more about the magic of it all. The integration, this is a little screenshot from DecisionVault basically saying, integration, and then you choose Gavel. And as Brittany mentioned, this would have all of the integrations that you have available to you inside of DecisionVault. Anything that you've connected, you can see them all here. So it's a really nice, in your face button. You just click it and it's going to prompt you to do what you need to do. It's going to take you to give you that link for you to jump into the Gavel workflow, which is what you're seeing in the middle. In that workflow, you'll have the opportunity to choose some kind of Gavel specific things in there that are going to help generate your documents. I like to have just a few questions in there that I think really shine with what Gavel can do that wouldn't necessarily pull over with the integration. So optimizing your Gavel workflow to work with DecisionVault is really helpful because it minimizes like any sort of extra data entry as much as possible. And you'll see here, Brittany had shown how to generate a single document, and she made mention that you can generate multiple documents. What I'm often doing for my clients is we're setting up a single Gavel workflow kind of per practice area or really per DecisionVault questionnaire. So however you break that up. So any sort of document that would need to be generated for estate planning, we have this kind of first page where you can click and choose all the documents you may want to generate. And this is just an example. Gavel is so customizable. So if you wanted to say like generate a trust plan and just choose that, and then that would spit out all the trust documents, that would be fine. If you want to split them up like you see here, and you want to say that we'll do the power of attorney and we'll do our closing letter here, that would be fine too. So that is something that you can choose, and you'll get into a flow as a firm of what you like and how you like to see it. And then what you'll do here is then download the documents and put them in wherever your centralized filing location is. And if there are any tweaks that you need to update, then you can. But what I find is most people can get 95% there with very thoroughly built out templates, and it's only for like these one-off, something is unique to the
Oh,
client
sorry. Thanks.
that you need to add something. Did you say something, Brittany?
No, I think someone just came off of mute for a second.
Oh, got it. Okay. So, and I also just want to mention one other thing about before we get into the capabilities that I really like in the Gavel as a document generating tool. The DecisionVault can also act as your client portal, and that's how I personally used it. I found that a lot of portals were like from CRMs or practice management were overwhelming to my clients. We really only needed them to enter data and for us to exchange documents. And DecisionVault can handle all of that. So sometimes if I was sharing drafts, that could be shared through DecisionVault. After people signed, I would upload all of their signed documents to DecisionVault. That way they have one login, and there's really only very limited amount of things that they can actually do. So it's really easy for them to find what they're looking for. So as a portal, that might be something that's ongoing throughout your representation with them, is having having them go back to DecisionVault to grab certain things or to update data. So my favorite Gavel capability. So what I'd like to do here is to talk about how Gavel as the document generation capabilities are the best I've seen with document generation tools. And if anybody has dabbled with document generation tools, you're going to understand how you've probably come across roadblocks with some of these items I'm going to discuss, where you're creating and you're tagging and you're doing logic and you're think, I wish it could do this, or why can't it do that? And then you're on the support, group with the going through their help and trying to figure out if it's an option, and you might say, well, that's just not how the capabilities work. With Gavel, I have yet to find something that I have dreamed up and wanted to do in a template that I or the Gavel team has not been able to help me do. So I want to give that shout out, and that's the reason why Gavel is my #1 document generation tool recommendation for my clients, is because you can do so much. It does so much more than what meets the eye. Even with that tagger that Brittany showed, that's just scratching the surface. If you have something that you want to do that you can't quite figure out how to do, their support team is amazing, and they will help you come up with some, detailed syntax that works exactly the way you're dreaming it up to work. So these are some of the things on the back end that I really like about Gavel and why I recommend it over others. So the first one is this idea of the CSV data. You can have a question type on the Gavel side that if you have data, let's say using this example here, like an attorney and staff member data, let's say you have, their names, and then you have maybe their bar number, different attorneys with your different bar numbers. Maybe they have different contact information, phone numbers, and emails. Maybe even they're working in different offices and addresses. You don't want to have to retype that information for your documents. And I'm thinking more of like probate, estate administration. This probably happens more. You don't want to have to keep retyping all of that information over and over again with every new client that you're dealing with. What you can do with these CSV files is you can basically upload something that's like a spreadsheet with all of that data. And once you run that DecisionVault integration, you just choose the attorney, like whoever the lead attorney is. It's Beth Kostelnik, and all my information will pull into all the right places of all the templates. So that's what a CSV file can do. It's like it looks up a record for you and can pull in all of that information. So that could be with multiple office locations. So if you have like signings in different offices, that's a different county, or you're licensed in different states, so there's different requirements of wording. You can have it pull in all of the right information based off of a spreadsheet of office location data or county specific data, thinking of like probate or guardianship forms or something like that, to have that housed somewhere so you don't have to keep remembering it every time. And there's one source of truth where you have to go and update it, and everybody's going to have the right information every time they generate those documents. Okay. There's invisible logic in Gavel as well. And what I love about invisible logic is it keeps the templates really clean. So if anybody's tried to implement a document generation tool where you're putting all of the syntax just to put like a he or a she or a they, so you're going in there and being like, or an I or a we, that if it's one client, then show I. If it's two clients, then show we. And you have to keep repeating that over and over and over again in all of your documents in order to capture that. Gavel has this invisible logic stuff inside of their backend that can be built out. And you can just say that have a one field that the appropriate reference will pull in whenever you need it. And that can have to do with plurals, and that can have to do with pronouns, but it's something that you'll never have to pay attention to. Once that information gets pulled over from DecisionVault, whether it's your questionnaire or the design sheet, it gets pulled over and put into Gavel. The invisible logic on the Gavel end is going to make sure all the right pronouns end up in the right spot. It's really neat. Multi-doc templates. Oh, and I'm running close to time. I'll try to go fast. The multi-doc templates. What this is super nice for is managing templates, where you don't have to have a bunch of different options. Like if you have a client that you're making for two, or a document that you're making two separate ones for two clients, you don't want to have two places to update everything. The way it can pull over from DecisionVault is it can recognize that there are two clients, and then it'll run the document, one for each client. And it's only one place to maintain it. If you're updating a clause or you're updating some logic in it, when you want to go back and make that update, then you're able to do that in one place. You don't have to worry about, uh-oh, we didn't update it for the version of that if there's two clients for client two. It's all in one place with the multi-doc. Another use case about this to kind of drive home how cool this is let's say you have letters going out to interested parties for estate administration. In DecisionVault, when you're doing that design sheet or you're adding the data from the firm side, you're saying, okay, here's our 10 interested parties. We're going to have to send out some notices. You just select them. Like DecisionVault, you just like click them. They just like bounce over to the right column. It's really neat. And then you run your integration. You click that you want this document to generate, and it just generates 10 different letters for you with all the right information in the right places. Like that's a huge time saver if anybody has had to do that before. And a way I see in the estate planning side is sometimes people will do letters to nominated guardians, to give them a heads up, like, hey, you're really important. You're part of my plan. This great law firm helped me do this. Here's what you got to do if something comes up. That's another example. Okay. And then the PDF capabilities are really advanced too. So court forms, county forms, and I would say also think of like creative visual files. So if you're doing emergency contact cards or minor children cards, or if you're doing like covers to slide into a binder cover, or if you want to do design diagrams, the PDF capabilities are really neat. And they're not just put one field here. Again, all of that advanced logic, it's a little bit on the back end. Sometimes you'll need Gavel support to help you with it, but you can create some advanced logic. Like for example, I had a field in a probate form that we had to do where they wanted the word adult to show up if it's an adult, but if they're a minor, to have the age and then comma and then minor. And we were able to come up with a little syntax that Gavel team helped me just like stick it in, and then that all generates exactly the way they want it to be. So it's pretty complex, and that was really neat. And then, of course, estate planning lawyers, the bane of our existence is retyping names over and over again. And even if you're trying to build these out in different tools or forms, you're sometimes asking your clients to type things over and over again. The way that DecisionVault is collecting the information is they type it once. Those fields are Like those records basically can be referenced in all the right places. So you put them all in the right spots throughout DecisionVault. When you push that over to Gavel, Gavel will see, is there one successor or are there five successors? And it will list, and it will be flexible to just make it what you want it to be. And that can just be a list. It could be entire like paragraph blocks. Like think of like signature lines. Obviously children, including other data about the children, you know, Bobby, age 12, Sally, age 13. Like all of those things can be done based off of just who's in that list in DecisionVault, pulling in multiple paragraphs to address multiple people in all of your documents. So it's done really, really well in Gavel.
Thank you so much, Beth. I think that was so helpful. We are at time, so I'm going to go ahead and just thank our speakers for today and to also give you some next steps to follow up with. I'm going to ask if our speakers can stay on for a little bit to answer any additional questions in the chat. So for next steps, if you want to get in touch with Beth, she does have a wait list right now. So you can go to techiepm.com/waitlist to stay in the loop with a new Jumpstart for DecisionVault and Gavel program, which I'm really excited about hearing more of. You can also start a free trial of Gavel at gavel.io. And then I'm actually personally running a free document automation bootcamp that starts next week. We're going to do an 1.5-hour session for estate planning, then the week after an 1.5-hour session on probate and how to automate the documents there. And then I'm doing a family law session in March. You can learn more and register at gavel.io/events. And then you can also see a product demo and go a little bit more in depth for DecisionVault and start a free trial at decisionvault.com. Thank you again to our speakers, for Wouter and for Beth, for taking the time to add their thoughts here. I'm going to stop the recording now so that we can have any questions answered so people feel like they can ask any questions.